Banana's a berry, I guess.
Hello, we're having an online discussion tonight. What's a fruit and what's a vegetable? If you have an opinion, comment in the comments and Andrea will read it out loud. Otherwise, welcome to Bible study. We're glad to have you here. You can help us out tonight by liking and sharing our Bible study. There's those little buttons down there, and believe it or not, the more people that you share this with or like it, the more times you like it, the more people can actually get to join us and see us and hear the Word of God. So you can help us by that. Other things that we need to talk to you about tonight is you received a Bible study on Facebook or through email that looks like this. If you didn't and you would like to receive one, put your email address down in the comments or DM me, and I will make sure you get on the list. Otherwise, all the things you'll need tonight will appear magically on the screen behind me. Grab a Bible, doesn't matter what translation. All the translations that we use here will be the Evangelical Heritage Version. If we don't use that version, it will be noted on the screen when you see it. And I think that happens once tonight. Other than that, I think it's time to get started. Now, as we have been doing, we're going to start with a couple fun facts. The first fun fact is you're noticing we're talking about the Holy Innocents. Those are the children that were killed by Herod after the wise men came. But what you might not know is that there was a fourth wise man.
Oh boy.
He was turned away at the door because he brought fruitcake as his gift. See, that was a good fun fact. No, was it a fruit or was it a vegetable? Oddly enough, after they left the wise men inside, because you're going to see tonight they came in the house, not in the nativity. So they came in the house, and the three wise men, one of the guys, he bumped his head on the door frame. He said, "Jesus, that hurt." And Mary leaned over to Joseph and said, "Write that down. I like it better than Kevin." Yeah, see. All right, but you know that's all garbage. All right, let's get started. So let's take a look. Take a look up at the screen. Just a reminder. We want a reminder what a martyr is. So a martyr comes from the book of Acts, chapter 1, verse 8. And here is the word in Greek, martys. And what we have when we look at this is the word witness. So if you look down one more, here is the actual Greek, and there's the word witnesses. So these are witnesses. It doesn't mean you have to die for your faith, but be a witness for your faith. All the martyrs that we talk about are going to die for their faith. Tonight is kind of an interesting one. And the reason why tonight is so interesting is we are talking about the Holy Innocents. If you go back to that picture real quick. Here you have a picture of a Roman soldier or a soldier in Jerusalem, and he's coming in and he's grabbing the baby right from his mother and murdering the child. And we're going to find out tonight that is because Herod was trying to kill Jesus. Okay? And so the reason why we want to keep that in mind is because these children, if they're the first martyrs of really the New Testament church, why did they die? Did they die because they stood up for their faith? No. But why did they die then? Did they still?
Because of Christ.
They died for Christ. They died, in that way. So they still get that term, the martyr. They died for our faith, yeah. Because had Herod succeeded, right? All right, so we're going to go on now to Matthew chapter 2. Grab yourself a cupcake. You guys at home are missing it tonight. We're having Oreo-filled cupcakes. They're delicious.
Hey, Pastor, is this supposed to be plugged in?
Nope.
No?
All right, so let's take a look. Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 6. Would somebody be willing to read verses 1 through 6 for me?
After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, when Herod was king, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. They asked, "Where is he who has been born King of Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was alarmed, and all Jerusalem with him. He gathered together all the people's chiefs and experts in the law. He asked them where the Christ was to be born. They said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, because this was written through a prophet. You, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are certainly not least among the rulers of Judah. Because out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel."
Okay, interestingly, before we jump out of this, I just want you to look at verse 6 on. This is actually a quote. He's quoting from the book of Micah here. And you hear that every Advent as we're preparing for Christmas. We read this because it reminds us of the Old Testament prophecy that Jesus was going to be born in Bethlehem. And so that gives Herod that laser focus of where he needs to look. As opposed to looking everywhere, he knows exactly where to look. And it's kind of interesting, we're going to talk about this a little bit too. Why did Herod not already know that? He's the king of the Jews, right? You would think that if you're a good Jewish boy, you'd be familiar with, you'd think if you're a good Jewish boy, you'd be familiar with the prophecies of the Jewish Bible. But he's not. He has to ask the experts and chief experts in the law. And there's kind of a reason behind it. We're going to get to that. So let's go to question number 1. You're going to need to open your Bibles to Luke chapter 2. It's not going to appear on the screen. And I want you to skim through Luke chapter 2. And this is the question that we're specifically answering.
The one time I can skim.
What events took place from the time Jesus was born to the arrival of the Magi or the wise men? So take a look, read through it. There's some hints in that scripture that says something happened. And in fact, while you're doing that, I'm going to read the little thing above that, the paragraph. It says, nativities are often set up with the Holy Family, shepherds, and of course, the wise men. The idea of gathering brings a sense of order and logic to Christmas. The scriptures tell of the angels appearing to the shepherds, of the great singing. Then there's the introduction of the wise men. However, there is an intermediate set of events that took place. It changes how we have come to see the first nativity, but not its historicity. And so this would be this idea of something actually happened. Our nativities are wrong in the sense that you see the wise men standing over the one side, the shepherds standing on one side, and Mary and Joseph in the middle. So what happened between when Jesus was born and the wise men coming from your book?
The shepherds came.
Okay, the shepherds came. That was probably on the night of Christmas. All right, what else?
His presentation in the temple.
His presentation in the temple. Look up here. This is from Luke chapter 2, verse 21. After 8 days had passed, the child was circumcised. So that's the naming ceremony, right? So he's being named, he's being circumcised, and notice the wise men haven't showed up yet. The wise men haven't showed up yet. Okay, anything else that you gathered from this? Look at Mary, what she's doing.
Treasuring up everything in her heart.
That's earlier.
Yeah.
Look after verse 21. They bring this idea of, and here it is up here, the purification. Now, this is where you're going to have to know a little bit of your Old Testament stuff. Because Mary's actually following an old Levitical law. You know, when Andrew and I lived in Pennsylvania, and we went looking for houses, long before you, Fiona.
Yeah.
They had special bathtubs, you would almost call them. They were walk-in bathtubs, and they would fill them with salt water. And every time a woman had a menstruation cycle, she would have to purify herself before she could be touched by her husband again. She'd have to go down in this purification thing. The same thing was true after childbirth, only it was done in the temple. And that's what we're going to see up here. Would anybody like to read what we see? This is from Reasons for Hope. Anybody want to read the little section there?
The time for this dedication was clearly prescribed in Levitical law. The days of Mary's purification were to be at least 40 days after the birth of Jesus.
So before she could be purified in the waters, she had to wait 40 days for that. So now we have something else, don't we? we have 8 days, Jesus is born, and then you got to remember, then in that whole thing, there's 40 days still that she's got to be purified after the birth to be considered clean amongst the men and people again. All right. Anything else? Keep looking. There's more there. And this one's a little harder. It's after verse 22. We can mine something else. Look at their sacrifice. You notice anything?
2 turtle doves.
2 turtle doves. They don't bring a goat. They don't bring a sheep. They bring turtle doves. Now, what do you think that might say?
They're poor.
They're poor. Now, why is this important when we're thinking about the wise men?
Well, if the wise men had already come, they would have easily been able to offer something better, but this was before the wise men because they were
Yeah,
dirt poor.
turtle doves are the very bottom of what you can buy at the temple. Remember when Jesus overthrows the tables and things like that? That's because they would sell the things in the temple, right? They would sell the lambs, they would sell those things. Well, they would have a whole variation of things you could buy, all the way up from a bowl down to turtle doves, right? And so it says up here, it says, Luke 2:24 tells that Mary made an offering of birds, that's plural. This is an indication that Joseph and Mary did not have the necessary funds to purchase the lamb for their burnt offering. They used turtle doves. If the wise men had been there, they had gold, frankincense, and myrrh. All of those things were very expensive. And what would they have done? They wouldn't have kept them. They would have sold them or used them for money, right? Trading. And so they certainly would have gone in and had a lamb or something like that. And this is interesting too. I thought this was interesting from reasons for. Go to the next one. Matthew 2. I'm sorry. Look back at Matthew 2 now, where we're at. Matthew. We're back in the book of Matthew now. There's one thing here, and this is from verse 11. After they went to the house, this is the wise men. After they went
Into the house.
Now, where were Mary and Joseph for the birth of Jesus?
Stable.
They were in a stable. They were in a nativity. Now we can argue a lot about exactly what that looked like, right? Was it a cave? Was it a stable? Was it the lower part, kind of like the garage of a house? We can argue a lot about that, but it's interesting. Here it says they were particularly in a house. They were in a house. All right. And so if you take a look, now this is from Reasons for Hope. It says, we are told in Luke that the following dedication, okay. Took 40 days, more than 40 days after his birth. Mary and Joseph returned to their home in Nazareth. So it is possible that the wise men were led by star to Nazareth. But it's unlikely that their journey would have taken close to 2 years. And so the thing about it is, this is quite some time after the birth of Jesus. Quite some time after the birth of Jesus. Here it says, maybe to Nazareth. There's some debate, because the Bible doesn't say, so you don't want to debate on it too much, but whether they were back in Nazareth when the wise men came, or Bethlehem. Probably still in Bethlehem would be my vote. And the reason why I'm getting that is because what we're going to find out where Herod is and how quickly he goes after Jesus once he finds out Jesus is there. And so if they're in Bethlehem, it would have been easier travel for him. All right, let's go to the next one. Question number 2. Read what it says up there from verse 2 and answer that question. What drew the wise men to Jerusalem?
Prophecy.
The prophecy?
Star.
The star. Both are prophecy and star, right? In fact, Luke 2 says, or not Luke 2, Matthew 2, when he who was the born king of the Jews, we saw his star when it rose and had come to worship him. So they see the star.
Didn't Daniel also have like something?
Yeah, exactly, yes. So here we go. Look at this. You don't even get to read it since you said it.
They were influential advisors of the king, very likely in Babylon. During the 70 years of the Jews' captivity in Babylon, Daniel was made the presiding officer over the cast of Magi.
Yeah. So Daniel would have instructed these people. or at least their elders, right? And so these things would have been passed down. They would have had the Jewish scriptures there. And we're going to look a little bit later tonight at the prophecy of Balaam. Balaam and the donkey, remember him? So Balaam makes a prophecy about a star coming up out of Bethlehem. And so if they were familiar with that, it was likely that that would have been a catalyst for them going, oh, wait a second. There's something going on here, right? So keep that. Now comes the question about who was Herod the Great, though. What do you guys know about Herod the Great? Anybody know anything?
He was a nasty dude.
He was a nasty guy. What do you know about him being nasty? You know anything?
He what do you call it? The word he was power hungry. He wanted his position. Something strange about him is that he was still called king, even though he was a subject to Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And he was probably the last of his line to be called king.
Mm-hmm. In fact, we know that his Herod Antipas applies to Caligula for that title and has declined it. Right, so he's now the governor essentially of the region. Yeah. So you're right. There's lots of stories. I'm going to show you a short video in just a second. But there's lots of stories. One of the probably most frightful stories that you're going to get is Herod was a builder, and so he was very good at building things. Like the temple, he built the temple after it was torn down. He rebuilds it. Right. I mean, it's Herod's temple. He builds many other things. And what happens is, as he's building things, the people in town recognize that he's a great man, but he's also very violent. And they'll talk about some of the violent things he does. But here's the thing. Everybody hated him. They hated him for a couple of reasons. One was he was not Jewish, actually. He's called the King of the Jews, but he was actually either a Moabite or an Edomite. And what happened there is they didn't like him for that, and they were afraid of him. And so shortly before he dies, he actually makes a plan. And the plan is this. He goes around and he has his guards arrest all the powerful and beloved people in the city. Like, your favorite people. And he has them jailed. And then he writes an order that says, at the moment that I die, you are to murder all those people. And that way people will cry and mourn the day that I died. But they're not crying for him. They're not mourning for him. Who are they mourning for?
Their family.
Yeah. Thank goodness he dies and they don't carry out the order. But that should give you a little bit of the, like you said, the violent nature, the sickness of heart of this guy. So let's watch a short little video on who Herod the Great is.
Here's some footage of the fortress Masada, which overlooks the Dead Sea in the Judean desert, and some footage from the city of Caesarea on the Mediterranean coast, and Herodium, and the Western Wall. What do all of these sites have in common? Well, beside the fact that they are monumental works of ancient architecture, they were all constructed or renovated under the direction of one man, Herod the Great. For those of you that know your New Testament, Herod was the villain in the Gospel of Matthew's version of Jesus' birth. The Magi follow a star to Judea and consult King Herod, asking where the King of the Jews has been born, referring to Jesus, not Herod. Herod sees this as a threat to his rule, so according to the biblical account, he orders every male child in Bethlehem under the age of 2 to be killed. But aside from the baby-killing tyrant described in Matthew, what do we know about Herod the Great? Today we'll explore the twists and turns of Herod's rise to power and his fight to keep it. Based on what we know from the archaeological and textual evidence, Herod the Great was a complicated figure. On one hand, he was a subservient client king to the Roman Empire, and on the other hand, he was a brutal and calculating politician who forever changed the landscape of Judea through his rule. First of all, even though Herod eventually became king of Judea, Herod was actually not a Judean. He hailed from the land of Idumea, the descendants of the Edomites, one of Israel's ancient neighbors to the southeast, who had been forcibly converted to Judaism by the Hasmoneans, a dynasty that ruled the region following the Maccabean revolt a century before. The Judeans, under the rule of the Hasmonean dynasty, conquered this region in 73 BC, a few decades before Herod was born. So even though Herod was born an Idumean, he was raised in a family that had adopted Jewish customs and eventually rose to a position of power under the Hasmoneans. But Herod owes his own rise to power to the Roman Empire. In 63 BC, when Herod would have only been about 10 years old, the Romans toppled the Hasmonean dynasty, which cleared the stage for his rise. Herod's father was already a high-ranking official and allied himself with the Romans. Because of these connections, Herod was appointed the governor of Galilee in 47 BC, when he was only in his 20s. So how did he make the jump from governor to king? Well, this is where we see his political savvy come into play. He rose to king of Judea by exploiting the geopolitics between two superpowers, Parthia and Rome. At the time, the Parthians were the most pressing enemy of the Romans. They were the successors of the Persian Empire and had moved westward in the period following the disintegration of Alexander the Great's empire. In 40 BC, the Parthians overtook Jerusalem, attempting to reinstate the Hasmonean dynasty. They installed their own Hasmonean king of Judea, thinking that the populace would more easily accept a Hasmonean king. But Herod had connections too, specifically family connections with the Roman politician Mark Antony. With his help, Herod convinced the Roman Senate to name him king of the Jews, and he returned to Judea with the backing of the Roman army to oust the Parthians. Victory was not easy, but Jerusalem eventually fell to the Romans in 37 BC, and Herod began his work as a client king. So even though he was stuck in the middle between Parthia and Rome, he came out of the war with a kingship. Not bad. But this calculating political skill continued throughout his career and would make any character in Game of Thrones proud.
You're a sharp little flint, aren't you?
Later, when Mark Antony lost in a civil war to Caesar Augustus, Herod did not beg Augustus to forgive him for his alliance. Herod boldly stood before Augustus and said, "Hey, I'm so loyal, I would have fought against you with Antony, even though I knew Antony was going to lose. You'll want this level of loyalty on your side." Next, Herod needed to solidify his rule over the Jewish people. Even though the Hasmoneans had been dethroned, Herod knew that his legitimacy as king was shaky as an Idumean and as a client to Rome. His father's Idumean heritage meant that he was understood ethnically as only being half Jewish. The people he ruled longed for leaders who were fully Jewish and wanted to restore the earlier Hasmonean dynasty. So Herod married Mariamne, a surviving heir to the Hasmonean dynasty, in order to solidify his claim to the throne. Later, when he suspected she was plotting against him, he executed his own wife to secure his power. He also executed his own sons that he had with her. Like I said, he was a pretty brutal guy. Is it any wonder that the Roman Emperor Augustus is reported to have said, "It is better to be Herod's pig than his son"? Herod might have kept a kosher table, but he did not hesitate to take out one of his own kids or his own wife if he perceived them as a threat to his power. Despite all of this brutality, though, Herod was a capable leader. Josephus tells us that he was a skilled general, consistently winning the battles he engaged in, and he was even an expert warrior himself, super skilled with both the bow and the javelin. During a period of famine and disease around 30 BC, he managed to create various programs to dole out food to the sick and old. He boosted local currency by melting his own gold, and he leveraged his political connections in Egypt to send aid to Judea. His success and influence as a ruler can be seen through his ambitious building projects too. Herod made at least 3 trips to Rome during his lifetime. The architectural renaissance of the city during the time of Augustus appears to have made a lasting impact on Herod. When Herod received additional land from Octavian after the Battle of Actium, Herod responded by commissioning a number of monumental building projects with the aim of demonstrating his loyalty to Rome and so as to secure his own power over Judea.
All right. So, kind of the thought process there should be, he was a plotter, and he was skilled at planning, and he was very evil. The story of his children was kind of interesting, wasn't it? That he would kill his own children to secure his power.
And the
So-
builder.
What's that?
And the builder.
Yeah. And so as you're thinking about this, though, as you're looking at Herod tonight, I want you to remember that all of his background is that it builds it on his character, right? We get a character picture of Herod. All right. So what does the reading tell us about him? Right after the wise men come, and tell him how does he feel? Look up at the screen. Anybody reread verse 3?
He felt threatened. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right. He was threatened, and we know when he's felt threatened before, what does he do? He kills, right?
He removes the threat.
He removes the threat. Yeah, right. He's going to hang on to his throne no matter what. So think about the alarming sense of this. Somebody comes and says, "Where is the King of the Jews born?" And here he stands, and what's his title?
King of the Jews.
King of the Jews. Right? And now all of a sudden you get this feeling that maybe he's seeing his throne go away.
I think he was afraid of being replaced.
Yeah.
Because he knew that he wasn't the first choice.
Right. And so Linsky, a Lutheran theologian, he says this. He says, Herod understood well enough that the king referred to by the Magi was the promised Messiah of the Jews. What he feared, and I think this is interesting, what he feared was a grand Jewish movement in favor of his royal Messiah, dethroning the alien house of Herod. Right? They already don't like him because he wasn't a true Jew. But now you have this promised Messiah. And we know that how they misunderstood the Messiah. How did most people understand the Messiah?
Political.
A political king. And that's likely how Herod understood it. Right? This guy's going to remove me and become the next Christ.
Well, he's a megalomaniac.
Yeah.
And because he is a megalomaniac, he hears this prophecy, and he thinks that a prophecy from the scriptures, from God, he can change.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, that really states that he is a megalomaniac.
Yeah.
He thinks that he can...
He's more influential than God.
Yeah.
Yep,
Brings
absolutely.
new meaning to the words God complex.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, you got to also imagine, though, the people that he's hanging around with. It was alluded to in the video a little bit. Herod was hanging around with people that were considered the rulers, right? So he was running in the crowds of, now they mentioned Mark Antony. Where do we know that name from history?
Cleopatra.
Antony and Cleopatra, right? He's hanging around with Cleopatra. Cleopatra claimed to be a god. And Caesar, the person, Julius Caesar was Mark Antony's good friend. And then the person he comes up and becomes friends with, and they didn't say it in the video, but he actually went to school with Augustus Caesar when he was Octavian. Right? And so you see that he's got these people in his orbit. So like Tim just said, he's a megalomaniac. He believes that he can change the will of God. Well, he's hanging out with the people that he believes can. Right? He has as much power. All right. So now let's go to Matthew chapter 2, verses 7 through 9. And let's find out what Herod does. Okay? He just finds out about the child that's been born. What does he do? Anybody want to read Matthew 2, 7 through 9?
Then Herod... Oh, I'm sorry.
Then Herod secretly summoned the wise men and found out from them exactly when the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. When you find him, report to me, so that I may also go and worship him." After listening to the king, they went on their way. Then the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stood still over the place where the child was.
All right, go back for just a second. Something that we're not going to talk about tonight, or it's not on the worksheet, but it's important for us to kind of pull out. Herod does something here that gives us a time frame. What's he doing? Look at the information and
He
specifically.
found out exactly when the star had appeared.
How long did it take them to get here? How long? And so what's he figuring out here?
How old this new king will be.
How old am I looking? How old is this guy? Right? That's what he wants to know. So he is figuring in his mind how old this child is. We've come to worship the new king. Well, is that kid just born? Were you guys on your way here? Where were you? He's plotting exactly how old this kid is. And that's going to play later on.
You know, it shows just how scared he was of keeping his position, that he was afraid of a child, really.
Yeah, but remember, this isn't the only time we've seen this in the scriptures, is it?
It isn't.
Do you remember David?
Yeah.
David was just a young boy and who was scared to death of losing his throne?
Saul.
Saul tries to kill David, doesn't he? And if we know anything, David is a picture of Jesus in the Bible, right? It actually says it. He's a type of Jesus. All right, so let's continue moving on. Herod was known for his treachery. While the scriptures reveal the death of the children in Bethlehem, there seems to be no secular corroboration. However, there are similar instances of Herod killing children. Morocobius, I think that's how you say his name, is an early Roman historian that recorded when Herod's son was killed. That's different than the ones he murdered. Herod ordered all boys in Syria under the age of 2 to be killed. Now we get another picture. So our liberal friends that say the Bible is a bunch of garbage and doesn't actually matter, they're going to say, you can't point to an actual event in Bethlehem that shows these children being murdered. But we do have secular accounts of very similar things that Herod has ordered in the past. So we're going to look at character for a moment, right? The character of, was there anything in the character of Herod that says he wouldn't do this? No. We know he's an awful person, right? This sounds like him. And my grandma used to say, if it looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, it's going to probably be a duck, right? All right. So now let's go to question number 4. It says, why would the wise men have gone to Jerusalem first? Isn't that interesting that that's where Herod lives? Why did they go to Jerusalem first if the star is leading them?
Because that's where the spiritual leaders were.
Amen. What did they expect when they walked in to the place?
They thought everybody would know.
Everybody's going to know. Yes, look. Our theologian says, it was natural for the Magi to come to the capital city of Jerusalem. They expected everyone to know about the Messiah's birth. And they were surprised when they asked around and received no information. Right? If a new king or if a new president is being inaugurated, what's Washington, D.C. going to look like?
Crowded.
It's going to be crowded.
Well, more crowded.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly right. So they come to Jerusalem. The newborn king has been born. When if you guys remember, it's been a while now, but when Prince William had his kid, there were thousands of people outside Buckingham Palace.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Thousands just showed up overnight. That's what they expected. All right. So
that shows you how the scribes and all that, how ignorant, or I don't know what you want to call it, they were. Because they never even brought it up until Herod asked them.
Yeah. And, you got to wonder, were they ignorant or were they scared? Isn't that a thought?
But there wouldn't have been any clues that the prophecy had been fulfilled at that time.
Well, if there was the star in the sky, and we're gonna, it's an obvious star. All right. Let's go to the what are the ramifications of their decision to go to Jerusalem? Yeah, they have to go deal with Herod. Herod is there, and the Lutheran Study Bible put it this way: Herod feared that his rule might be challenged. Herod sought to deceive the Magi. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. What are the ramifications? They have to deal with Herod. All right. So the question is, what are the ramifications, or what does Herod want? Why does he want secrecy for his actions?
He didn't want anybody else to know.
There you go. He wants to pull the Magi aside, and he wants to get them to give him as much information. And meanwhile, he's fearing already. Remember that there's going to be an uprising from the people. So he wants none of the other people in town to know about it. He's trying to cut this off before it gets too big. And that's what I was reading just a second ago. The Lutheran Study Bible says Herod feared that his rule might be challenged. Herod sought to deceive the Magi, hoping that they would report back to him what they had found, and that he might finalize his plan to kill the infant king. Right? All right. Question number 6. Now this goes back to something Andrea said a moment ago. Was there anything that people would have seen? Could the star have been a comet or a planet? Now let me tell you where I'm getting that from. Again, those folks that don't believe the Bible and they wish to demythologize the Bible, they wish to make it be something that is logicked out. They're going to say that it's a comet. And that's what the star was. You saw the comet move across, like Halley's Comet. The other thing, and the more common recent thing, is that you had Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter all aligning at the same time.
That's been around for
Yeah.
50 years.
But that's the favored description now. That the fact that they were all together, kind of eclipsing one another, made them brighter, and that created what looked like a star.
You ever try following a star?
Yes, we have. Well, not a star, a rainbow. It took us to Ron's and we bought Dale Lucky Charms.
Oh,
So, what do you think? Could it have been
No.
why not?
A few reasons. One, it was consistently in the sky for years, not one night or 2 nights, but years.
Yeah, while they're walking.
Another is that it didn't rotate with the rest of the stars or anything like that. It stayed in one place as a guide.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the Magi we believe they're from Babylon. To put a little like thought in your head, that's Iraq. So think about where Iraq is in the world, and now think about where Jerusalem is. And these guys are hoofing it. They're not taking the train or an airline, right? And so this takes some time, like you said. And if it was a comet, think about how fast comets pass. Yeah. If it's an eclipse of these planets, how long does that last?
Maybe a few nights.
2 nights, maybe, right? But this is clearly something greater. There's another thing that is interesting. They go to Jerusalem, and then it seems to indicate that the star disappears. Did you catch that? Look at the text again in Matthew 2. They get to Jerusalem, and then it says that the star reappears, or the star comes back and leads them on. This is what Albrecht says. The star that guided them was a special creation of God. It did not look like the other stars, and it did not act like other stars. Efforts to explain the conjunction with other planets, such as Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, or as a meteor, as a comet, just are not satisfactory. And this is what I was talking about too. Look at this. This is from Numbers. Anybody want to read this? This is the Balaam prophecy.
I see someone who is not here now. I look at someone who is not nearby. A star will come from Jacob. A scepter will rise from Israel. He will crush the heads of the Moabites and destroy all the people of Seth.
All right. So here we have this a star will come from Jacob, an Old Testament prophecy, right? Yeah, go ahead.
I've heard this before, and I've heard this discussed before, and some say that, and back in that time, a lot of times when you say star, it actually, a lot of people then, a star represented their king.
Yeah. And actually, it's interesting because this prophecy, if you look at it, is not talking about a physical star in the sky. It's actually talking about Jesus. So what you just said is very true. However, the early Jewish folks that would read this would use this at the time of Herod to also give him, when they come in and they say, we've seen the star, they would say, here it is, right? So where is it coming from? The house of Jacob, right? So it's guiding them to the king by star. All right, Matthew 10, Matthew 2, 10 through 12. My goodness. All right, you think I need a nap or something? All right, go ahead.
When they saw the star, they rejoiced with overwhelming joy. After they went into the house and saw the child with Mary, his mother, they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Since they had been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they went back to their own country by another route.
All right, notice fruitcake was missing. All right, deceived by Herod's hypocrisy, the wise men happily travel to see the newborn king. Perhaps they assumed that the birth of the king was to be celebrated by all. They ventured from Jerusalem to Bethlehem in about 2 hours. That's how long it takes to walk between the two. Unsure of the culture of Herod's heart, the wise men were guided by God for their next move, right? So there's no indication that they suspect anything until God says something, right? remember, they're from Babylon. And so had they come from the east and in that direction, what they would have known of Herod, we don't know. But putting the best construction, they could have just, we met with the king. They were used to dealing with kings. But God then comes and warns them, right?
Go back to the star.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I think about, and I read about the wise men following the star. It reminds me of the pillar of smoke by day and the fire by night, which led the Israelites to the promised land.
Yeah.
And this star was leading the Magi to the promise.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I'd have to look more into that. This Sunday, you're going to hear about kind of a similar thing where there's a Bible story where the Pharisees accused Jesus's disciples of being wrong for not washing their hands before they eat. Right? And I researched into why they were washing their hands because they didn't know about germs. Right? So why were they washing? And if you look, they actually had to wash at least to their wrists, but it was preferred to go all the way to their elbows. And so I looked that up, and it turns out that the reason why they did that was it went back to the story of Moses around the burning bush. When he was at the burning bush, he had to take off his shoes, right? Because he was amongst a holy God. And so they began washing their hands as a way of remembering that story because everything they were eating was a gift from God. And so why would you touch the gifts of God with unclean hands? And so that was the point of the original reason for that, but it lost its meaning over time, the same way our dinner prayers might be when we run through the mode of it. So the idea that the pillar of fire leading them to the promised land is kind of it'd be interesting if that's really what they had in their mind, perhaps, at that time. All right, let's go back to question number 7. Look at verse 10. What seems to indicate that the wise men were true believers?
They rejoiced when the star returned.
Yeah, when the star returned, they rejoiced, right? And then look at this. It says, when they saw the star, they rejoiced with an overwhelming joy, right? And if they were just going to see the newborn king and they thought it was just a secular king that wasn't actually their king,
That wouldn't have brought that much joy.
yeah, it wouldn't have brought an overwhelming joy, right?
Nor, I think, knowing that it was an infant, a child, really.
Yeah.
It would have been decades before he would have ascended to a political throne.
Yeah, there you go. And they might not even be around anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know how old they were, but that's kind of an interesting thought, too. Yeah, so this idea that they come with overwhelming joy. Now, why would they be believers from a far-off land? It goes back to Daniel. Daniel would have left the prophecies and things, and they would have acquainted with them. Sometimes magi get a bad reputation because that word magi is actually where we get the word
Magician.
Magician, magic, right? But not all magicians. If they were squares, right? So all rectangles are squares, but not all squares are rectangles, kind of thing. All magi were not magicians.
What you're talking about there also didn't it have something to do when you talked about the magicians was those of the old knowledge?
Yeah, and so that's right. So you have to really dive into what that word means and how it's used in the scriptures and how it's used in secular sources. Because sometimes magi is someone who studies astrology, and sometimes it's somebody who studies astronomy, right? And they use the knowledge of the time. All right, so that's something interesting. All right, the next one, we don't know how many wise men there are. Why do we assume there were 3?
3 gifts.
3 gifts. But I hate to shatter everybody's Christmas thoughts. We don't know.
Well, we know it was plural.
If you want to see something interesting, go to the Toledo Art Museum. That's kind of neat. They have a section in the Toledo Art Museum on like religious pictures. And if you look, the super early pictures they have there, like from, you have to go in the far back, they have this big stone room, and they're from about 1100 AD. They have 4 wise men in the pictures. Right? And that's interesting. Maybe that was the one that brought fruitcake. But the point is, we don't actually know. We get it from gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Look up here. And this is kind of interesting too. These, we're not going to get into this tonight, but to just touch on it. The gold is something that these visitors or emissaries would have brought for royal children. Frankincense was given some to gods because you burn it, and the prayers go up before you like incense, like in the liturgy. And then the myrrh was actually something that was used in funeral preparations, embalming fluid.
We don't know if there was just one chest of gold, one of frankincense, one of myrrh. They could have brought, each of them could have brought one of those three things.
You're right, and we're going to talk about that in a second too, because we have some thoughts on that. All right, so let's talk about what we do know about the wise men, and I'll turn that over to this gentleman.
Question: what does the Bible say about the three wise men, or magi? In this video, I'll answer that question from a biblical perspective. Then afterwards, I'll share some helpful resources, so stick around to the end. We assume that there were three wise men because of the three gifts that were given: gold, incense, and myrrh. However, the Bible does not say that there were only three wise men. There could have been many more. Tradition says that there were three, and that their names were Gaspar, Melchior, and Balthazar. But since the Bible does not say, we have no way of knowing whether the tradition is accurate. It is a common misconception that the wise men visited Jesus at the stable on the night of his birth. In fact, the wise men came days, months, or possibly even years later. That is why Matthew chapter 2, verse 11 says the wise men visited and worshiped Jesus in a house, not at a stable. We know that the Magi were wise men from the east, most likely Persia or modern-day Iran. This means that the wise men traveled 800 to 900 miles to see the Christ child. Most likely, the Magi knew of the writings of the prophet Daniel, who in times past had been the chief of the court seers in Persia. Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27 include a prophecy which gives a timeline for the birth of the Messiah. Also, the Magi may have been aware of the prophecy of Balaam, who was from the town of Pethor on the Euphrates River near Persia, in Numbers chapter 24, verse 17. Balaam's prophecy specifically mentions a star coming out of Jacob. The wise men were guided to look for the King of the Jews by a miraculous stellar event, the Star of Bethlehem, which they called his star in Matthew 2, verse 2. They came to Jerusalem and asked concerning the birth of Christ, and they were directed to Bethlehem. They followed God's guidance joyfully. When they arrived in Bethlehem, they gave costly gifts to Jesus and worshipped him. God warned them in a dream against returning to Herod, so, in defiance of the king, they left Judah by another route. So, the Magi were men who, 1, read and believed God's word, 2, sought Jesus, 3, recognized the worth of Christ, 4, humbled themselves to worship Jesus, and 5, obeyed God rather than men. They were truly wise men. Hungry for more? Subscribe.
All right. So there you get kind of a picture of who the wise men are and what we actually know about them. He mentioned 3 names. That's kind of interesting. Does anybody know where we get those 3 names? It's early letters written by early church fathers. And so it's probably a tradition, right? And so just, we don't know that. We can't say that. It's an early tradition. All right. How soon did the wise men leave after visiting Jesus? So they go and they visit Jesus. They give frankincense, gold, and myrrh. But how long did they leave?
At least one night.
Yeah, look what it says. Since they had been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they went back on their own country by another route. Or back to their own country by another route. Okay. So you said probably about one night?
At least.
Yeah. So here's the general thought here. It would have been unwise for them. You got to remember, back in Jerusalem, what is Herod doing?
Getting ready to take care of the...
He's got a scheme.
Right.
He knows how old this child is. He sends the Magi there, right? How long does it take to get from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, did I say?
2 hours.
2 hours. So you follow this thing, you get there, you find the thing, you visit with it, and then you come back to me. How long should it take? 4 to 5, maybe 6, 7 hours at most, right? Because this should be a pretty quick event, right? So Herod's not going to hold off on his attack too long, right? We're not talking a week that they hung out, right? They made this pretty quickly. Linsky, a Lutheran guy, he says this: if the Magi left Jerusalem toward evening and arrived in Bethlehem an hour or so after dark, they, as well as Joseph, received the divine warning that same night. And both the Magi and Joseph must have left Bethlehem that very night. So his thing is, as soon as they have the dream, they don't get up and go, oh, I'll have breakfast down here at the local diner, right? They wake up from this dream and they know,
Time to cut out.
I'm hitting the road, right? And so that's an important piece of information. This is the timeline on this is very quick here, right? All right. So now we're going to go to Matthew chapter 2, verse 13 through 15. Do you want to read this, somebody?
After the wise men were gone, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared to Joseph in a dream. He said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, because Herod will search for the child in order to kill him." Joseph got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt. He stayed there until the death of Herod. This happened to fulfill what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet. "Out of Egypt I called my son."
Now, kind of quick, we just got a timeline here. Did you hear the timeline?
Mm-hmm.
What's the timeline?
Now,
Right now.
Right now, and how long are they going to stay in Egypt?
that's
Till
what
he gets
Herod's
called out.
going.
Herod dies in, I think it's 6 AD. So we think that they were there for at least 2 years, because we can get Jesus's birth when they figured it a little wrong on the 0 AD thing, right? And so if you figure it out according to secular people that are there and Herod's proclamations and Augustus Caesar's thing, we can get it at about 2 AD, right? And Herod dies in 5 or 6 AD. And so we're talking they were in Egypt for quite a while after this. All right, after God's warning, Joseph immediately left his family in the middle of it in the middle of the night. This is an example of how God protects his people. When threatening challenges surround us, we trust that God is in control and he will protect us. Most of all, we know that he has already protected us from our greatest enemies, sin, death, and the devil. Question number 10. The Lord directs the family to Egypt. Can you provide any other examples of how Egypt is often used as a place for refuge?
Yeah.
Genesis 4, I'm looking it up so I remember exactly when. Like 42 to the end of Genesis.
Yeah. So there's quite a bit, right? The first one, the one that you just referenced, was Abraham. Abraham, remember, he even goes to Egypt, and that's when his wife is approached by Pharaoh. Do you remember? And Sarah is asked if she's married. Do you remember that? He was there for protection. All right? Genesis 46, Jacob and his family. Joseph is now the ruler. And what does he say? He says, bring the family here where I can protect them, in Egypt. All right? First King, Jeroboam, is being chased by Solomon. And when he's being chased by Solomon, he goes to Egypt, and that's where he escapes for a short time. And same thing in Jeremiah, we get the story of Uriah, and he escapes to Egypt for protection. All right, question number 11. How would Mary and Joseph been able to afford their time in Egypt?
They just got a whole bunch of gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
Yes! So they get this gold, frankincense, and myrrh. God now says, you guys go live in Egypt for a few years. Get out of Herod's reach, right? And so they travel to Egypt, and now they have gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They have enough money to support themselves while they're there. Because, his carpenter stuff, he can probably do some of that, but he's not going to be able to get support his family the same way he was where they were. Okay? So that's kind of an interesting piece of equipment, too. And this is from Albrecht. It says, they probably used costly gifts of the Magi to finance their journey and stay in Egypt. The best guess is about 2 years is how long they were there.
Once again, proving God's providence and timing.
Yeah, absolutely, right? That all of these things lined up, and God would provide them with exactly what they needed when they needed it. All right, now we get to the martyr part. Would you finish this reading out for us, somebody?
When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the wise men, he was furious. He issued orders to kill all boys in Bethlehem and in all surrounding countrysides from 2 years old and under. This was in keeping with the exact time he had learned from the wise men. Then what was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and she refused to be comforted because they are no more.
All right, go back to the last page. Here we go. It says that he had them ordered the death of children 2 years and old and under. This was in keeping with the exact time that he had learned from the wise men. So now we know about how long Jesus had been born. About how long?
2 years.
About 2 years, somewhere within that 2-year range. Because he was able to figure out from when they saw the star, how long it took them to get there. He says, the rough estimate that I'm giving is 2 years and somewhere underneath. Right? So Jesus is still in Bethlehem at about 2 years of age. Which wasn't unusual at that time. A lot of the folks that would go to places where they would register for these censuses and things, it was cheaper just to stay there.
Especially if they already didn't have much money.
Exactly. And they were just married, or just getting married. And so to start a new family, a new place would have not been that unusual.
Well, Joseph had family there.
Yeah, and he had family there. And so we have all kinds of reasons to believe that he was probably still there. All right, so about 2 years old. Herod makes no bones about his fear and need to cling to power. His horrid proclamation is a reminder that all things work together for the good of those who love him, for those who are called according to his purpose. The death of these infants are examples of unintentional martyrs, right? Because they didn't stand up for the faith, but they died for the faith, right? All right, so let's take a look at question number 12. Those who deny that this event happened claim that historians would have recorded a massive slaughter of children. What is the answer to their accusation? I want to show you 2 quotes from Wikipedia. All right? Would somebody read the first one?
Some Christians venerate the holy innocents as the first Christian martyrs, but modern scholarship finds no evidence that it happened outside the passages in Matthew.
Okay, so it never happened is what this guy says. All right, second quote.
The Greek,
Go ahead.
the Greek liturgy asserts 14,000 holy innocents, while an early Syrian list of saints asserts 64,000. Coptic sources assert 144,000.
Okay. But here's the thing, ready? So we've got these big numbers here, and there's no secular record of these many deaths in the town of Bethlehem or Nazareth. Anybody got a way we can get around or explain that one? Or did we just find our first contradiction in the Bible? First way to disprove it.
Herod called the wise men to him in secrecy. He easily could have done this in secrecy as well from anyone that would record it. And also, people would have been afraid of him.
Yeah, he could have done it in secrecy. But the thing is, he didn't really have too many bones about killing people.
No, this isn't the first time for him.
Yeah, go ahead.
How big was Bethlehem?
Yes.
Oh, little town of Bethlehem. Oh, little town of Bethlehem. Now, here's the interesting thing. Remember that census that Augustus took? We know how many people were in Bethlehem. Does anybody want to guess how many children were likely killed? What is an actual estimate according to the actual population? If you look at the population birth at the time, how many children in the last 2 years were probably born in Bethlehem? That were boys. Let's find out. Here's the first one. It says, no, it's interesting. Josephus, the major historian, does not mention, and therefore a lot of biblical critics will pounce on that aspect of the nativity account and say, therefore it didn't happen. Now, please understand that this argument is an argument from silence. That is the weakest form of argumentation that you can use. As we say in the profession, and he's a police officer, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Now, here's our fact. Since Bethlehem was a small town, we can estimate that the total number slain was about 15 or 20. And some estimates are as low as 8. So he's being generous here. So now, let's do something else real quick. Does anybody know what the mortality rate of children at the time was?
It was high.
It was in the 70%. So the idea that maybe 15 kids died to Josephus, it was nothing. That was happening every day. Kids were dying, right? In fact, they just recently found in Rome, when I say recently, within the last year, they actually found where children were being thrown in rivers, like the canal by the temples. Wasn't unusual. Nobody knew it was happening. Why didn't anybody know it was happening? They were used to children dying, right? So that wasn't something for such a small number to die. It wouldn't have been something that maybe he thought was that important.
You know, another thing you got to consider with Herod, this was not probably the first squirrely thing that he's ever did. I think, you know, since he was so scared about losing his position that everybody was used to, if anything ever came up that he figured was threatening, he would eliminate. I mean, he did his own kids in.
He's within a few years of his death at this point. So all of that stuff we talked about earlier, with the exception of him arresting all the people, he had already committed those crimes. And so for him, like you said, it wasn't that unusual, right?
Yeah, it was nothing for them to hear about it.
All right, next question. Tonight, the Bible study is called the Holy Innocents. So what does that mean when we call these children the innocents?
They didn't commit any sins worthy of, like, being murdered like that.
There you go. So they didn't stand up. They didn't say, I will put my life on the line, right? So when we say innocent, they were slaughtered simply because of Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? What it's not saying is
no, they were not like innocent of all sin.
Because they are still part of the all of sin and fall short of the glory of God, right? So they're still sinners. There is no one who does good. No one does good. So we're not saying when we call them the holy innocents, we're not saying that they're innocent of sin. We're saying they're innocent of the crime that they will be murdered for. Yeah. Okay? They were not the king of the Jews. Yeah. All right, question number 13. By the way, before we go, I got to tell the story of what they did in the 17th century for Holy Innocents' Day. Remind me, because I'll tell you. All right. So, explain how Herod's twisted logic connects to today. So, let's think about Herod's logic for just a second. Why did Herod kill these children? He didn't want to be overthrown. It was inconvenient for him, wasn't it? That would be a big, major inconvenience for him to have to go through a war, maybe. Remember, it says that he was worried about uprising amongst the people that wanted a real Jew to run the country. And so if you're Herod and you see this possible revolution coming, how could you bend your head around, maybe it's better just to murder these kids?
How old was he?
So I believe he's in his 60s at this point.
And he's worried about somebody coming up from birth to throw him from his throne?
Right.
Right. Yep.
So let's go back for a second.
I mean, that's kind of twisted.
It is, but how does it connect to today? I want you to think about this idea of he's trying to prevent a revolution, is what he's thinking, right? All these people are going to overthrow him, and is he just going to go, oh, I'll step aside? No, so what's he going to do? Raise an army, right? And now what you're going to have is a civil war. So if you're Herod, how can you logic out killing all these babies to secure your throne?
For the good of the people.
There you go. It's for the good of the people. It's going to save more lives, right? Now, I want you to think about...
One innocent should die for the many.
Mm-hmm.
Where'd that come from?
I know, but we're not going to do that. So I want you to think about this real quick. In today's society, why do we have abortion?
Because it's inconvenient to have a child at this time, or it makes us remember something painful, or any number of reasons.
And so isn't it better to kill the child than ruin somebody else's life? Right? Look at this. I think this is great. Herod's heinous crime reminds us of the ongoing deliberate and systematic destruction of thousands upon thousands of unborn children by abortion in our own day. Is this not even a greater crime? Herod perceived a real threat to his own authority when he committed this crime. And he may have reasoned that it would be better to sacrifice 15 or 20 children than to permit a bloody revolution to take place when this newborn king would attempt to seize the throne some years later. Many of our fellow citizens murder their unborn children as a matter of convenience, and the laws of our country will permit it. They insist that they are being kinder and more considerate to their children than they would be if they were allowed to the birth of an unwanted child or children whose needs were not able to be met or provided. Selfishness can make murder seem like a good thing. And I want to be clear here. Here's the thing. Roe versus Wade was overturned, but that doesn't mean abortion is gone. Okay? It's still here. And so keep that in mind. In essence, it's the same logic that Herod's using. And that just should tell us the devil never invents new things. He just recycles the old. Right? All right. So how are these children martyrs? We've kind of talked about this a little bit. How are they martyrs?
They died because of Jesus.
They died because of Jesus. And I like this. This is from the Lutheran Study Bible. It says the young boys of Bethlehem died, but Jesus escapes. He escapes for all sinners. One so cruel as Herod or so young as the 2-year-olds, Jesus sacrificed his innocent life to redeem all people from sin, death, and the power of the devil. Trusting in Jesus, we have perfect innocence before our Father in heaven. And so this idea that they died so that Jesus could live, so that we could live, right? And that's the thing. All right. Now I'm going to tell you right before we go, because I'm a little over time. So log off, but it's a fun story. So we celebrate the festival of Holy Innocents on December 28th. That's the day the church says that's when the reading is assigned. And in Europe, they used to have big events for this. Like they would have special church services and all kinds of things, and you would remember this event happening. This is true. Up through the 17th century, children in Germany and England and all of these places would be awoken by their parents beating them with whips, like a switch. That's how you wake your children up on December 28th. And the reason why they did that was so that the kids would remember how God had blessed them with good parents that wouldn't kill them.
Oh, that's horrible.
Happy Innocents Day. And then we'd all go to church. And so they have stories that this went on from about the 1300s all the way to the 17th century.
Wow.
And we're going to reinstate it this year.
No. But there you go, right? That's an idea for you. But with that, let's end with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you that all your plans work out for good. Help us in our days see that you have given everything for us. You led the wise men. You lead us to your word. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, we'll see you Sunday for our first Bible study on the book of Esther. I hope to see you there. Bye-bye.